Rain poured down on the city as Detective Ricardo, his gaze fixed on the window, felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold. A woman's scream echoed through the dark night, followed by a terrifying crash. Was Isabella, the witch of his dreams and nightmares, in danger? A dark figure, with eyes gleaming like infernal embers, emerged from the shadows. Would Ricardo be able to save her in time? The answer was hidden in an antique mirror, which reflected not only images, but also ancestral secrets, and a power capable of destroying everything, or saving everything. The rain hammered against the panes of Detective Ricardo's window, as if 1,000 tiny hands were trying to get in. He, sitting in his worn leather armchair, felt a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. A strange fear, which froze the blood in his veins, enveloped him like a heavy cloak. Ricardo was a man of science, of proof and evidence. But that night was different. Isabella's scream echoed in his memory, a sharp and desperate sound that cut through the silence of the night like shattering crystal. A scream he knew all too well. The ensuing crash was even worse, a boom that seemed to have split the earth itself in two. Ricardo leapt to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. He knew, felt deep in his soul, that something terrible had happened. Something that trapped him in a web of mystery and magic. He had to go to Isabella. He had to save her, even if it meant facing the darkest forces São Paulo had ever seen. He remembered the last time he saw her, her green eyes shining intensely under the full moon, and the scent of herbs and magic hanging in the air. Isabella, the witch, the woman who had unexpectedly captured his heart and transformed him, without him realizing it, into someone capable of believing in the unimaginable. Someone capable of loving in different dimensions. Ricardo grabbed his overcoat and hat, the rain hitting him like millions of cold stabs, as he hurried out of his office. On the street, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the rain turned the streets into murky, dark rivers. He needed to get to the old mansion where Isabella lived. It was a mysterious place, shrouded in an almost permanent veil of mist, a house that seemed to hold secrets as old as time. But now, the house seemed to weep under the storm, its windows like eyes of fear. On the way, Ricardo spotted a figure, a tall, slender black figure, moving with supernatural speed. It was like a shadow that stood out from the darkness, with eyes gleaming like infernal embers that seemed to burn the night itself. That figure was pure evil, pure dark energy, and Ricardo felt a shiver run down his spine. It was the enemy, the threat that had haunted Isabella for so long, the one who sought to steal her great ancestral power. Ricardo's heart pounded, but he wouldn't back down. He had to fight for Isabella. He had to protect the woman who had awakened feelings in him that he thought he could no longer feel. The woman who had taken him to another world, a world of magic and enchantments, of dangers and intense loves. Upon reaching the mansion, Ricardo found the door broken down, pieces of wood scattered on the floor, as if they had been struck by an incredible force. The air was heavy with a fetid odor, a smell of fear and something magical, something wrong. He entered cautiously, with each step feeling the dark energy pulsating around him. The house was silent, a silence so profound it was almost deafening. Ricardo called out for Isabella, his voice echoing through the dark, damp corridors, but only heard the response of the rain that fell incessantly. Suddenly, he saw her, or rather, he saw her reflection in the antique mirror that adorned the main room. It was a huge mirror with an ornate silver frame that reflected not only the image, but also a whirlwind of ghostly images, glimpses of a distant past. And in the reflection, he saw Isabella. She was lying on the floor, unconscious, and beside her the mirror showed the black figure, with those eyes that seemed to burn the soul, smiling cruelly. Its black energy emanated in visible waves in the distorted reflection of the mirror. Ricardo knew he didn't have much time. He had to find the source of power of this mirror, discover the secret it held. Because in that reflection, Ricardo perceived more than just the simple image of an attack. He saw a larger plan, a threat that went beyond the simple capture of Isabella. He saw a plan to destroy the very balance between the two worlds, a plan that only he and Isabella could prevent. And this antique mirror, with its ancestral magic and immense power, was the key. He knew he had to act fast because the power contained in that mirror could destroy everything or save them all. Isabella's life, the balance between the worlds, everything depended on him, Detective Ricardo, who until recently only believed in material evidence. Now he needed to trust his intuition, his courage, and the love he felt for Isabella. The rain hammered against the panes of Detective Ricardo's window, as if 1,000 tiny hands were trying to get in. He felt a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Isabella's scream echoed in his mind, a sharp and desperate sound that cut him like a knife. A monstrous crash followed the scream, a boom that seemed to have split the earth itself. Ricardo knew, deep down, that something horrible had happened. He had to save Isabella, even if it meant facing hell itself. The image of her green eyes shining under the full moon, came to his mind. Isabella, the witch who had invaded his skeptical world and filled it with magic as intense as it was frightening. A love that transcended the real, a love that crossed worlds. Ricardo ran out, the wind howling like a hungry wolf around him. The rain hit him mercilessly, but he didn't feel the cold water, only the burning of fear and the unwavering strength of his love for Isabella. He had to get to the mansion, that mysterious house that seemed to breathe ancestral secrets. That night, the mansion wept under the storm. Its windows seemed like eyes full of terror. On the street, he saw the figure. A black figure, like a living shadow, with eyes gleaming like infernal embers. It was the personification of evil, the dark force that haunted Isabella. Ricardo felt a shiver run down his spine, fear mixing with incandescent rage. That being was the personification of darkness, and yearned for Isabella's power. Ricardo's heart beat like a hammer, but he didn't stop. He had to protect Isabella, the woman who had awakened feelings in him that he thought he could no longer feel. The woman who had taken him to a world of magic, of dangers and overwhelming love. Upon reaching the mansion, the scene was worse than he imagined. The door was broken down, wood scattered on the floor as if a tremendous force had destroyed it. A fetid smell hung in the air, a smell of fear and corrupted magic. Ricardo entered cautiously, the dark energy pulsating around him like a malignant heart. The silence was deafening, broken only by the fury of the rain. He shouted Isabella's name, his voice echoing through the dark, damp corridors, with no response other than the sound of the storm. Then he saw her, or rather, her reflection. In the antique mirror, a huge mirror with a silver frame, he saw Isabella lying on the floor, unconscious. Beside her, the reflection of the black figure, its infernal eyes smiling cruelly, radiating a palpable, almost visible black energy in the whirlwind of ghostly images that the antique mirror reflected. It was a mirror that showed not only images, but secrets, memories, and even the imminent threat. Ricardo realized he had no time. That wasn't a simple attack. It was a larger plan, a threat that went beyond Isabella. It was a plan to destroy the balance between the worlds, a plan that only he and Isabella could stop. And the mirror, with its ancestral magic and immense power, was the key. The power contained in that mirror could destroy everything or save them. Isabella's life, the balance between the worlds, everything depended on him. Ricardo, the skeptical detective, needed to trust his intuition, his courage, and the love he felt for Isabella to decipher the mirror's secret and confront the approaching darkness. Isabella's life, and perhaps the fate of 2 worlds, was in his hands. The rain fell in torrents, turning the streets into raging rivers. Ricardo ran, the wind whipping his face, with each step feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Isabella's scream, sharp and desperate, still echoed in his ears, mixing with the boom that seemed to have ripped the sky. He could feel the black energy, a wave of evil that enveloped him like a heavy, suffocating cloak. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for the outcome of this battle between light and shadows. Reaching the mansion, the image of destruction hit him hard. The door, shattered, scattered pieces of wood on the floor, like the bones of a fallen giant. The air, thick and fetid, carried a smell of fear and something much more sinister. Something magical. Something wrong. Ricardo entered the house, his steps cautious amid the debris, every sound amplified by the terrifying silence of that stormy night. The dark corridors seemed to whisper secrets, each shadow seeming like a monster ready to pounce. He shouted Isabella's name, his voice hoarse and desperate, echoing without answer, except for the constant and relentless sound of the rain. Fear squeezed his chest, but the image of Isabella, wounded and defenseless, propelled him forward, each step a silent promise of protection. And then he saw her. Or rather, he saw her reflection in the antique mirror in the main room. A huge mirror with a silver frame worn by time, but shining sinisterly under the weak light that seeped through the broken windows. In the reflection, distorted and ghostly, Isabella was lying down, unconscious, while the black figure, the malignant shadow, rose above her, its infernal eyes gleaming with cruel triumph. It was more than an attack. Ricardo realized, looking at that infernal reflection, that figure didn't just want Isabella. He wanted the power she possessed, an ancestral power connected to that antique mirror, a power capable of destroying or saving worlds. In the reflection, he saw images passing quickly, fragments of a dark past, of ancient rituals, of incalculable power, and he understood. The mirror wasn't just an object. It was the key, the source, the center of all magic. Ricardo approached slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The black energy radiated from the mirror, an oppressive force that suffocated him. He could feel the fury of darkness, the insatiable thirst for power. But Ricardo, guided by his love for Isabella and an unexpected inner strength, did not retreat. He knew he needed to break the power of that mirror, cut the connection between the black figure and the ancestral magic. It was a race against time, a battle against supernatural forces. The rain outside seemed to fight alongside him, each drop like a cry of revolt against the darkness that was taking over the mansion. With a swift movement, Ricardo grabbed a heavy silver candelabra that was nearby. It was a desperate struggle, an act of faith and courage, a leap into the dark guided by love. He raised the candelabra, concentrating all his strength, all his hope, in a single movement. It was time to face the darkness, to fight for love, for the balance between the worlds, and for the life of the woman who had stolen his heart and taken him to the other side of reality. He closed his eyes, and with a desperate cry, he hurled the candelabra towards the mirror. The future, Isabella's life, the fate of two worlds, depended on that single moment. A deafening sound, a crash that shook the mansion, marked the end of the climax, the culmination of an epic battle between love and fear, between light and profound darkness. The crash was deafening, a shock that seemed to split the mansion in half. Dust and shards of glass flew through the air, while Ricardo stumbled backward, his ears ringing. When the dust settled, he slowly approached the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of fear and hope. The reflection, once so clear and threatening, was now cracked, fragmented like a broken carnival mirror. The black figure had disappeared, vanished like a nightmare at dawn. Isabella was there, pale and wounded, but alive. An immense relief flooded Ricardo. He ran to her, kneeling beside her inert body. The rain outside seemed to lessen, as if nature itself was celebrating the victory. He called her, his voice hoarse and full of emotion, and felt a slight tremor in his fingers. Delicately, he embraced her, feeling her warm body against his, a contrast to the cold that persisted in the mansion. Isabella slowly opened her eyes, her green eyes meeting his, full of surprise, relief, and a deep, silent love. They looked at each other for a long moment, without words, only mutual understanding and the strength of shared love that transcended worlds, dimensions, and even the ancestral magic that surrounded them. The mansion, amidst the wreckage, seemed a silent witness to their journey, of the love that bloomed in the darkness and had managed to defeat the dark force that had attacked them. But the calm didn't last long. A new crash, stronger than the previous ones, shook the mansion to its foundations. This time, it didn't come from inside. It was a crash that came from outside, from the sky, an explosion of energy that illuminated the night with a strangely blue and cold light. Ricardo and Isabella stood up, startled, looking through the only intact window. In the sky, there was a strange door, or portal, of dark blue energy, shining intensely. It was a portal from another world, very different from the one they knew, a portal that did not emanate magic, but a metallic cold, a coldness that chilled even Isabella's heart. From within the portal, A dark, colossal, and imposing figure emerged, much larger and more powerful than any threat they had faced before. An imposing figure, made of shadow and crystal, with eyes of glacial blue, piercing like death itself. The eyes fixed on Ricardo and Isabella, and a slow, cruel, lifeless smile formed on its lips. It wasn't just a dark force, it was something much older, much more powerful, much more terrifying. The rain stopped completely. The wind stopped. A total silence took over everything, broken only by the gasping breaths of Ricardo and Isabella, facing the imposing and terrifying figure that observed them from the dimensional portal. It was the beginning of a new battle, much larger and more dangerous than anything they had imagined. A battle against a threat that transcended magic, an enemy that came from a world beyond human comprehension. Pure terror took over the air, an oppressive feeling that crushed their hearts, a feeling of helplessness in the face of such a colossal and terrifying force. That icy gaze, coming from the newly opened dimensional portal, carried a promise of destruction, a silent warning of what was to come. The final battle was about to begin, a confrontation between the love that united them and an implacable force that came from an unknown dimension. And this time, Ricardo knew that their lives, and perhaps the fate of all worlds, depended on something much more than magic or courage. It depended on a miracle.